What about the fact that the study specifically states that they did not ask them about their outside of gym activity, which means that for all we know, all of these participants who were highly motivated and well strength trained could have been doing other sports and cardio. We don't know. What's up, guys? So today we're going to talk about some comments that Dr. Milo Wolf made on Instagram and why I think he is wrong. So I'll include the Instagram post here, and I can also put it in the comments, on where Milo Wolf commented on the need for cardio for weightlifters, basically saying that he didn't think it was necessary and that he didn't even think it was actually helpful for most people who are weight training regularly. He briefly shows pictures of Peter Attia, and Andrew Huberman, and references them being people who recommend significant amounts of cardio in order to increase one's VO2 max. Now, I disagree with plenty of what Huberman puts out. I think in general what Peter Attia puts out is good information, but he uses them as references because they are well known for recommending, especially Peter Attia and his VO2 max guidelines. He says, if you're weight training regularly and you do squats and deadlifts and you're fairly active, then you really don't see any benefit. He says basically minimal to no benefit from adding additional dedicated cardio. I would note that this not only disagrees with people like Peter Attia, who obviously have a strong focus on longevity, it also disagrees with the American Heart Association and their recommendations for cardio. The AHA recommends 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio per week, and or 75 minutes, so basically it could be a blend of this, 75 minutes of vigorous activity or 150 minutes of moderate activity per week on top of your strength training. Milo references a paper saying that the weightlifters in this study had an average VO2 max of 48. He goes on to say that this is already a high VO2 max and that doing more cardio will not really benefit somebody. Now, the implication here by Milo is that if you are somebody who is doing regular weight training, that you're probably going to have a VO2 max around this level and that more cardio isn't really beneficial for your health. And there's a few significant issues with that conclusion. For one, he's referencing a single paper, and the paper itself notes that the values they found are very unusual. Numerous studies have looked at VO2 during weight training, and they find levels, even again, mentioned in the paper and mentioned in the literature, between 15 to 30, maybe 35. That is dramatically different than 48, okay? Very, very different. If you're going up a flight of stairs, you might get into the 20s, if you're doing a lot of stairs and whatnot. Talking about a 48 VO2 is quite high. In fact, I've mentioned my mentor in college, Dr. Nicholas Radamus. He is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. He is prominent in the field and has hundreds of publications. He ran a similar study where they found, again, 16 to 31 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. So again, very different than 48. I have not only worked in Radamus's lab, but I have done at least 2, if not 3, actually VO2 max tests in his lab. And when I was in my early 20s, my VO2 max there was around 50. And when I had recently tested it a few years ago, it had dropped to the mid 40s, which makes sense based on just aging in general. Your VO2 max does go down with time. And so while I'm not disputing the results that this study got, I am saying that that is not going to be typical, and it's not what the average 30-plus-year-old weightlifter is going to find. As a reference point, I mentioned that I had actually gone to Radamus's lab to test my VO2 max. I had brought my brother, and so this was a couple of years ago. At the time, my brother was 33 years old, so very much within this cohort of the people in this study. He had lifted at that time for about 5 or 6 years. Now, he was no longer as serious, and he was not doing dedicated cardio at this time. However, my brother, of the two of us, was more athletic, especially from a cardiovascular standpoint. He was a track athlete and a cross-country athlete all through high school, okay? When we tested his VO2 max, he was at 39.5. And again, at the time, I was in the mid 40s because I was actually doing dedicated cardio. So you have somebody who's doing dedicated cardio and more seriously weight training, mid 40s. My brother, former track athlete, former cross-country athlete, still lifting, 39.5. Additionally, if you look at the protocol in that study, they did 5 sets of 10 squats with 3 minutes of rest at 65% of their 1 rep max. That is borderline aerobic activity. I mean, that's basically like intervals, which again is somewhat Milo's point, but that is not how most people are training. The average person, and not even just the average person, just most people who are lifting weights are not going in there and doing 5 sets of 10 squats with 3 minutes of rest. That's just not reality. And if you look at the actual VO2s per set, it goes up and up and up. most people, even though they think, oh, I'm resting 2 to 3 minutes, it's just not reality. Like and the problem is you're telling this to thousands of people on Instagram, right? So you can't say, well, I personally train this intensely and therefore it doesn't apply. That's fine. I'm not saying Milo Wolf or even like an Eric Helms has to do cardio. Eric Helms has said something similar, that he's doing, 5 weight training sessions a week. He's not resting that long. He's really getting at it. But who is your audience? And the audience of Milo Wolf is some very serious lifters, but a lot of people who maybe think of themselves as really serious lifters, but 4 weight training sessions a week and 4,000 or 5,000 steps a day, those people would almost certainly have some health benefit by doing cardio. And again, it's not like VO2 max is the end all be all marker of health. There are other potential health benefits of doing cardio beyond just increasing your VO2 max. For example, we have a lot of data to show that the more walking one does, the more benefit they get to their health, right? So more activity. So walking is not doing a lot to increase one's VO2 max, but it is doing a lot to benefit one's health in other ways. And so I know that Milo says if you are fairly active, but he doesn't define fairly active, and he kind of just references like some steps and whatnot. I would still argue that if you're lifting 4 days a week and you're averaging about 5,000 steps, that's really not that much activity, and more activity, whether it's a lot more walking or dedicated cardio sessions, would benefit you. That's why I do dedicated cardio sessions. I've mentioned before, I only get about 4,000 to 5,000 steps per day. If I was getting 15,000 steps per day, I could see an argument for not doing dedicated cardio. But most people, the vast majority of people are not getting near that much activity, that much steps, that much walking in. And so I think it can make sense to have some dedicated cardio. And I say that as somebody who really doesn't like cardio. I've been doing dedicated cardio since I was 12 years old. And the entire time, outside of a short window in college where I stopped doing it, outside of that, I've done it the whole time. I don't like it. I found different ways to kind of make it go faster or try to make it more enjoyable. But if I could justify never doing cardio again, I would. I just think that the preponderance of evidence suggests that cardio is beneficial to one's overall health. And the fact that some high volume, short rest period squats can temporarily spike VO2 max up very briefly does not mean that it is going to be as good as dedicated cardio at increasing one's VO2 max. There's obviously quite a range of people in that study as far as their initial VO2 max levels. And so if you look, they were an average of 28 years old. But what about the 40 and 50-year-olds who want to benefit their health more and get that next level up? What about the fact that the study specifically states that they did not ask them about their outside of gym activity, which means that for all we know, all of these participants who were highly motivated and well strength trained could have been doing other sports and cardio. We don't know. This could have been a highly motivated group of individuals if they're signing up for this study who actually do other activity, and that would completely disqualify everything that Milo is saying there. So we just don't know, and I would bet that they probably do have some other activity because, again, the literature really does not support that level of VO2 from just weight training. The study concludes by saying that this may not be generalizable to most people, and that you cannot assume that squats are going to be serving the same function as cardio, or that they're going to result in the same outcomes as cardio, or any of that. And of course, as I said before, the VO2 max is not the only indicator of health. There are a lot of other potential benefits from low and moderate and high intensity dedicated cardio. So anyway, guys, hope I didn't get too much into the semantics there. While it's someone, I don't want to say it's not an attack on Milo because obviously I'm directly addressing Milo. It's not a personal attack on Milo. I know Milo actually does get a lot of hate in the industry. I've had him on the podcast, I think twice now. Only good interactions with him, truly. So again, I'm mostly just kind of pinpointing this because that was actually something we had talked about on a podcast probably a couple of years ago now, our differences of opinion of cardio. But because Instagram is very much about, quick takes and, 1 or 2 minute reels, I just wanted to break this down and specifically state why I disagree with his take overall and why I think the conclusions of the study he references are really not appropriate conclusions. So I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any additional comments, feel free to put them down below. Let me know if there's anything else out there that you'd want me to comment on. Subscribe to the channel for more, and I will see you next time.